All right. Okay, I told you I was going to give you a hard one. This is the hardest one that we're going to do Rice's theorem, which is more abstract. But this is a hard one. All right, now what's the problem? Everybody just ground yourself, because we're going to have we're going to have 3 algorithms now. We're going to just make this harder. So remember I said, remember what everything is and where it comes from, and right? So what is our problem? Let's focus, let's breathe and read our problem. I'm given a Turing machine, the problem is, given a Turing machine, look at the language that the Turing machine accepts, right? And here I said the word accepts, not computes. Why is that? Because M may or may not halt, right? And on inputs where it halts and says yes, we're going to say the string is in the language. And when the Turing machine does anything else, it can say bye, it can run forever, it can say no. If it does anything else, we're going to say the string's not in the language, right? And that gives us a language, right? What is a language? We all did regular expressions. A language is a set of strings, right? Some set of strings can be solved by DFAs. And some set of strings can't be solved by DFAs. So what's this problem supposed to do? Given a machine, it's supposed to consider the language and ask, is that language regular or not? If that language can be done by a DFA, it says yes. And if it can't, it says no, right? Now, clearly, that's a hard problem. No one's going to argue that that's a hard problem, right? So we just have to prove that it's a hard problem. We have to prove that that's undecidable, right? So how do we prove that this is undecidable? We pretend that it's decidable. We pretend that there's an algorithm that for any M will stop and say, yes, the language of M is regular, or no, the language of M is not regular, right? We pretend we have an oracle for that. And we use that to come up with an oracle for the halting problem, right? All right, so for example, we really like this code, right? So let's work with this code and see if it works for us. And it won't. So we'll have to change the code. But let's start work with this. Well, if M halts on I, then M prime halts on every I. So what's our language? Our language is the everything language. It's the yes language. Is the yes language regular? Yes. So the oracle says yes. Oh, that was pretty good. Right, that's what we wanted. But let's do, if M doesn't halt, then it doesn't halt on any string. So what's the language? The language is the no language. It's the nothing language, right? Is that regular? Yes. So the oracle says yes. Has this been helpful to us? No. All right, so we have to change things. All right, that didn't work. All right, so now I have done this problem before, and you guys, you think you've gotten confused so far. You'll get more confused, all right? So I go home and I make more slides. So hopefully these slides help you. All right, we're really trying to think about these instance maps, right? So what are we doing here? Well, what is the input to this problem? It's a Turing machine, right? In every Turing machine, here we can examine in, every Turing machine has a language, right? So here we got 3 circles, right? Why? Here's the algorithm here's the problem which is the halting problem. Here's the problem which is this problem. And now what is this problem? These are the ones where this machine in prime says yes, and these are the inputs where this machine says no, right? So, and why is this a yes Turing machine? Why is the input to this yes? It's because it happens to be computed by this DFA, right? And why is this one a no? Well, because it happens not to be computed by a DFA. Right? All right. So This is the set of all Turing machines, right? This can have an arbitrary Turing machine as an input. So this is the set of all Turing machines. And I get muddled if I think about all Turing machines. Let's talk about my favorite Turing machines, because it is all about me. All right? What are my favorite Turing machines? Well, I really like the Turing machine that always says yes. I like the Turing machine that always says no. I like the Turing machine that says yes on 0 to the n, 1 to the n, and no on other things. I like the Turing machine that says yes on 1 to the n, 0 to the n, and says no to other things. Those are 4 really nice Turing machines. Right? Everybody got those Turing machines? There are other Turing machines down here that do wild things, and we're just not going to worry about them. Right? Because remember, one thing that we have to remember here is over here, my boss gives me m and I, and I don't get to choose it. Right? But what I give m prime is my choosing. I design m prime to be whatever I want it to be. Right? This is an instance map. I'm taking an m and an I here, and I'm designing the m prime. So I get to design. Oh, did I drop my head? I stepped on you. I stepped on you. Life is just unfair if you're in the ether world. All right. Everybody get what we're doing here? All right, so this is just a review. What is this Turing machine up here? It says yes if the form is 0 to the 1, 0 to the n, 1 to the n. Otherwise, it says no. Right? And there's not one Turing machine that says yes on these and no to these. There's an infinite number of Turing machines that do that, right? But I like them all. All right? Here's another question. What is this Turing machine? This Turing machine up here, does it care anything about whether the input's 1 to the 0, 1 to the n, 0 to the n? No, it doesn't care. It says no to all of those, right? It doesn't care. I'm just saying obvious things so that we're on the same page, right? All right, what does this Turing machine do? It just says yes, right, which is regular, right? And so we're going to come up with an instance map, right? You ready for the instance map? Remember, I got to map yes instances to yes instances and no instances to no. Oh, yeah. So here's a yes instance. I map it. These are all yes instances, right? Because they were regular. So I'm going to map these yes instances to these yes instances, and these no instances to those no instances, right? That's what I need for an instance map. Everybody agree with that? I don't know whether m halts on I, but I'm going to map it over to an m prime, such that if m halts on I, then m prime is a yes instance. Otherwise, it's a no instance. That's what I'm doing. If m halts on I, I'm going to map it to a yes instance. Otherwise, I'm going to map it to a no instance. Right? So now my goal is to design a Turing machine, m prime. I'm given an m and an I, and I want to design a Turing machine, m prime, such that if m halts on I, what does m prime compute? It says yes on 0 to the n, 1 to the n, and it says no on everything else. No, sorry, I lied to you. If m halts on I, it always says yes. That's what we want. If m halts on I, it always says yes. And if m doesn't halt on I, it says yes to those strings and no to the other strings. Does that make sense? Okay, then let's design code. We can write code. All right, here's code. It's not very hard. The first thing I have to think about, I can think about, right, so here's m prime yes. And here's m prime that says 0 to the n, 1 to the n. Right? So I want m prime either to always say yes or to say yes here or no here. Right? So I look at these two pictures and I say, well, what's the same about these pictures? Where on these inputs, in both cases it says yes. Right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say, hey, I'm given an I prime. If I prime's in this circle, what do I do? I halt and say yes. All right? Okay, now let's think about inputs out here. What do I do for them? Well, in this case, I say yes. In this case, I don't say yes. Right? So what do I do? In those other cases, well, I run M on I. If M halts on I want to be over here. And so I'm going to say yes. Right? And if M doesn't halt on I, if M doesn't halt on I, this is just going to never halt either. Well, if M doesn't halt on, we're going to do it here. Let's keep going. Let's look at the do cases. If M on I doesn't halt, right? Let's look at what is the language of M prime. Well, let's look at it. If I prime has the form 0 and 1, 0 to the n, 1 to the n, what does M prime do? It halts. Right? What happens if it has the form 0 to the n, 1 to the n? What does it do? It comes down here, runs this, runs forever, doesn't it? And it runs forever, right? What happens if it's any string that doesn't have this form, right? It runs forever. Everybody agree with this? So what is this language? The language of M prime is 0 to the n, 1 to the n, right? Is that regular? No, right? And here I note M prime recognizes it doesn't compute. Why does it? What's the difference between recognizing and computing? To compute, you always have to halt. To recognize, you only have to halt on the yes instances. All right? So here, does M prime recognize this language or compute it? It recognizes it, right? Because it often doesn't halt. All right, so is this language, it's not regular, so, right? So the oracle is going to say no. I don't know why I didn't say that. Now let's say it does halt, right? If it does halt, if I prime has this form, it says yes. If I prime doesn't have this form, it says yes. No matter what, it says yes, which is regular, right? So what do we have? If M halts on I, then M prime is regular, and the oracle says, we say the same thing, right? So now we prove that it works, right? If it does halt, the oracle says, if it does say yes, then the language is everything, which is regular, so the oracle says yes. And we say yes, so we're good, right? And if M doesn't halt an I, then the language is 0 to the if M prime is 0 to the n, 1 to the n, and it's not regular, so the oracle says no, and our halting problem works. What do you think? Don't you love my new slides? They're just like, did you get that? What do you, Sure. All right? Sure. But, this is the name of the game. All right? And this really is hard as we're ever going to do. And, in fact, actually, I would say that this might even be the level of difficulty that I put on the exams in the past. Yeah. All right. Yeah, so the same thing as I've said before, right? Everybody got the big picture? I can go back for 5 seconds. Right? It just says, if we're given an oracle for this problem, then we're going to come up with an algorithm for the halting problem, but we don't have an algorithm for the halting problem, so we don't have an algorithm for this problem. Right? Yeah?
For the case where M does halt, did you say that the language is regular because it's always saying yes?
This is the language. It's the yes language.
So is that empty bracket? I mean, sorry, is that
Star.
zero star?
That's everything. Right? It's saying yes to everything. You know, I talked about the machines that say no to everything and the machines that say 0 to the end and 1 to the end. I talked to them just so that we can have other examples. But we never use them. We just use these two. Right? We needed to think, when you're doing these reductions, you have to think, how can I get when my instance is a yes instance, how can I get the oracle to say yes? And when my instance is a no instance, how can I get the oracle to say no? And even though I don't know whether my instance is a yes instance or a no instance, I have to tweak my input into a form that the oracle can understand it, and the oracle will know whether it's a yes or a no. Yes, I'm looking at you. That was the no instance. No, you're mixing metaphors there. Well, over in the my problem is given a Turing machine and when it halts or not. If it halts, then I say yes. If it doesn't halt, I say no. Over in the I'm a guy who knows whether Turing machines are regular or not. If you gave me a Turing machine that always says yes, then that's regular, and I'm going to say yes. If you give me a Turing machine that says yes on these and no on these, then I know that that's not regular, so I'm going to say no. And when I said you said mixed metaphors, because on yeses you talked about, on no's you talked about these, and on yeses you talked about halting. So I didn't like your answer. My instance map. Right, my instance map. Where's our instance map? Here, that sounded like a duck, didn't it? I'm given an M and an I. And when my M halts on my I, I don't know it, but when my M halts on my I want to map it over to an M prime that accepts everything so that the oracle will say yes. And when M doesn't halt on I want to map it over to an M prime that says yes on 0 to the end, 1 to the end, so because that I know that's not regular, and so the oracle will say no. We want our instance map to map yes instances to yes instances and no to no.
But like the one outside the circle, it halts, and then so it says no, and then but then 0.
Sorry, the one outside of the circle here?
And not halt.
That doesn't halt.
That's not halt.
Yeah.
So that would say no, and then 0 and 1 end would say yes.
No, 0 to the end, 1 to the end is not regular. So this oracle says no.
No, but then it halts also.
But we don't care whether this halts. We care if this is regular or not.
Is there a reason why we didn't map it straight to the machine that says no the same way we mapped the other one?
To the one that always says no?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the one that always says no is, well, we can't map both of these to the no's. We could have mapped these to the no's. Right? These we want to say yes. The no, I did that example at the beginning, right? I first said, right, what do we do first? We map these to these and these to these, and the oracle said yes for both of them. And that was lame. Right? Good? Why does it say yes for these ones? These prime ones? M none. These. Oh, well, what's the language for M none? The language is it says no to everything. Right? The language of M prime is no. Just say no. You know what your parents taught you about drugs? Just say no, unless they're good. Unless you share. All right, so here, is this regular? Yes. I can give you a Turing machine. I can give you a DFA that solves this. What's the DFA that solves this? Just say no. Right? Yeah, what does the oracle do? If M prime computes a language that's regular, it says yes. Right? So really when we start these, you got to make sure you're getting what this problem is. Right? What's this problem? I'm given an M prime. M prime computes some language. Right? This language happens to be regular, so the oracle says yes. This one happens to be regular, so the oracle says yes. This one happens to be not regular, so the oracle says no. Right? And I'm given an arbitrary M and an I, and I decided to map to either these guys or these guys, because I know these guys are yeses and these ones are no's, so I designed my code. Right? I designed my code so that, so that we have, if M holds an I. Yeah?
So if I prime has the form of 0 to the n, 1 to the n, oracle will say no because it's not right. No?
You're the kind of guy I want to fail. I'm sorry. No, you got to keep track of where everything is. All right? All right. So let me repeat what you said. You said if I maybe I misunderstood. It's hard.
So the code for n prime
Yeah.
is that if I prime has the form 0 to the n, 1 to the n, we call it test.
Yes.
That's the code. But the oracle will still say no because it's not a regular expression.
Regular language, in that regular Turing machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I got to check because it sounded like you were giving inputs to the oracle. Right? What we give to the oracle is Turing machines. Right? And if the
Because I guess what she means is 0 to the n, 1 to the n is not regular.
Yeah. So that's this picture kind of over. Right? So if what? No, it never says no. What? No. All right. So here our goal is if M doesn't halt, then we map it up to a Turing machine like that. All right. So are we? What are we getting? Here we're getting that if M doesn't halt an I, I'm given an M and an I, so I build this Turing machine. Right? That's right now. We've just said we know that my goal is to know whether M halts an I or not. But let's just go through the steps. If I'm given an M and an I build this M prime. Now let's ask what this M prime does. Well, if M doesn't halt on I, what does M prime do? If I prime has the form 0 to the n, 1 to the n, then M prime accepts. And if I prime doesn't, it runs forever. We agreeing with that? So what's the language of M prime? This is the language of M prime. Right? Is this language regular? No. This language is not regular. All right, so if I gave M prime to this oracle, what will this oracle say? No. You got that? Yeah, so there's levels of subtlety here, right? You can see why people get muddled, but you can also see how it's not very hard. Yes?
I think it's easier if we change the names of the Turing machines because they're all M prime. So we get confused which M prime we're talking about.
Well, it's the M prime that's on this page.
Yes, but here we're talking about the one that accepts only on 0 to the n, 1 to the n. And then we talk about M prime that tells us no because it's not regular.
Oh, you're talking about those machines, but those machines are the same. I have an M and an I build an M. I don't know whether M halts on I. If I knew whether M halts on I, then I wouldn't need an oracle. I don't know whether M halts on I, so I build one M prime. That's the code for M prime. Now we study, what does this code do? This code, there's only one M prime, it's this. What does this code do? Well, if M doesn't halt, then this M prime says yes on these inputs and no on the other inputs. And if M prime does halt, then M prime says yes to everything. It's the same M prime. Yeah?
But then what's the... When does it say that it's regular or not?
When does it say what?
If it's regular or not.
So here, this is, let's review what happens. Right? I want to prove that this is a hard problem. So by way of contradiction, I assume I have an oracle for it. What does this oracle do? I give it an M prime. It tells me whether that M prime is in this language or not, which tells me whether its language is regular or not. Right? So now I try to design an oracle for the halting problem. So I'm given an M and I. I want to know whether it halts. So I construct M prime. And you'll note it's the same M prime no matter what. That's my M prime. It depends on my M and my I, but I don't know whether M halts on I. I don't know what M prime does. Right? So then the oracle, I give this M prime to the oracle. Right? And the oracle, it'll either say yes or no. And whenever it says, let me just go through it, it says yes or no. Right? Everybody got that? Now we need to know, we're assuming that this oracle works. Now I want to prove that this oracle works. I'm going to prove I'm solving the halting problem. Why am I solving the halting problem? Well, there are two cases. If my input's a yes instance, it's a yes instance because my M halts on my I. Well, what happens when my M halts on my I? Let's look at this code. Turns out that this always halts, so M prime language is regular. So what does the oracle say? The oracle says yes. And in the other case, M doesn't halt. So what is the language? The language is 0 to the n, 1 to the n. If the oracle is only supposed to say yes or no. But I have a particularly nice oracle. He tells you what the language is. He tells you it's not regular. He says no. Right? And so I say no. So I have an algorithm. Do you have a question? Do you have a question?
So all of these different examples, we're trying to find ways to simulate the halting problem in order to prove something about another algorithm, or if it's harder or easier, or...
I'm not sure we're simulating the halting problem. We're designing an algorithm to solve the halting problem. Right? If this was an algorithm that always stopped and solved this problem, then this is an algorithm that always stopped and solved this problem.
But within it, we use the universal simulation condition, right?
Yeah, well, or we cut, my boss gives me this code and I cut it into this code. Right? So is that a simulation? It's more of a cut and paste of code.